This next section of the team project information includes the main part, which would be the recommendations proposal. So at this point, you can imagine yourself set up as a consulting company with your team members, and you're going to be sharing the work of this recommendations proposal by the amount of people in your team. So what you'll be doing is those different parts that were included in the RFP are also listed here, these 11 points. So the instructions for all those points are indicated in this section. You'll be able to find this handout in your course den under course projects, as well as in different sections that will be specifically addressing these parts. So there's some small parts to this proposal, which are indicated right here. And then there are some big parts. And the big parts of the proposal are the parts of the proposal that you're actually going to be submitting in advance, almost like drafts, but those drafts are going to be graded, and they're actually going to be worth 50 points. So it's important that you do it right and you have everything that you need so that once you and your team members submit these drafts, they'll get critiqued, and then you'll be able to put them together, and you should have a perfect document in the end. So because this is such a huge project and it's worth 300 points, it's difficult in many times to determine if people do the minimum or the maximum. So there's an accountability part of this project. And in this accountability part, you'll see this in the grading rubric, that if the team does the minimum in each section, you're only going to be able to get an 85% score as your highest grade. However, if you go above and beyond in the requirements and you actually show some additional accountability or effort, then in this case you can get above and beyond. You can get a grade in the A section. And I'm going to show you the actual template right now. So this is a template that has all the different sections. And if you take a look down here, make this a little larger. Okay. When you take a look at the bottom, so for example, in the different sections where there's A and B or above and beyond, and I'll explain to you what those mean in just a moment, if you do what's required, you would get 17 points. However, if you went above and beyond and completed some extra, that would be between 18 and 20 points. So perfect score. And same with the areas that have 10 points. If you go the minimum, you could get 8, but if you go above and beyond, then you can get between 9 and 10 points. So each section of the proposal is indicated here on this grading rubric of what you need to include. But to give you specific information on what you need, this document that we are going through will give you all the details. So first of all, depending upon how many students are in your team, you can have a team of 4, a team of 5, or a team of 6 students. Because most classes have a team of 5 students, I'm going to go through that. So each of the teams will need to complete some specific parts of the project. So one of the team members might take on the role of team number 1. This, they would have to do the statement of need, which is to be done first, the cover page, they'd have initial contact with the organization or department, and they'd also have follow-up with the organization or department. They would be responsible for possibly one of the team meeting agendas and minutes, and then a completed proofreading sheet. And that proofreading checklist is actually worth 25 points. It just verifies that you and your team members have proofread and you've proofread it prior to submitting it. So that would be what one person would need to do. And this bold statement of need, that is what will be graded for the 50 points for the draft. Okay, the next person in the team might take on the background of the consulting company, which is one of the first things to be done. This is an interesting area because this is where you and your team members try to make your consulting company as credible. Remember back to chapter 1, as credible as possible, and also as reliable and dependable. And you're really going to talk up how your company is a wonderful company and that they should want to do business with them. Now you can pretend that your company consulting company has been around for several years. You can talk about different organizations or departments or universities that they've worked with in the past, and what the and what would be involved, and I'll get to that section in the details in just a moment. References would also be part of that person's responsibility, a team meeting agenda and minutes, and the completed proofreading sheet or checklist. The next person would be responsible for the internal and external communications, which is one of the first things to be done, as well as a table of contents and that proofreading checklist. This is a big section, so whoever does this section can also solicit help from other team members, but because of the fact that it includes the internal and external communication, it also includes a SWOT analysis, a chart, and a chart for internal and external communications that are currently happening. That would be needed to be turned in as a draft because it's in bold, and it would be worth that 50 points. The fourth team member would be responsible for the recommendations. And remember, there's a minimum of 6 recommendations. If you go above and beyond and add a couple more, then it would be considered extra and would give you full credit. The recommendations will be completed towards the end. They also will be doing the conclusion, a team minute agenda and minutes, and the completed proofreading checklist. And then the fifth member would be doing an executive summary, which is the absolute last thing to be done, the letter transmittal, which is also one of the last things to be done, the team meeting agenda and minutes, and the completed proofreading checklist. And the letter transmittal is what would need to be turned in for that 50-point grade. The executive summary is one of the larger parts as well. It's not going to be turned in for a grade. However, if the student is interested in submitting it to make sure they're on track, it probably wouldn't be a bad thing to do. So each team will end up having 3 team minutes and agendas with team meetings with agendas and minutes, and that will be explained more in another section, but that's why there are different places in the responsibilities of the students, and perhaps one student might do the agendas and then it might rotate with the other students with the minutes, but that's the reason why. Okay, as I mentioned briefly, the proofreading and editing of the proposal is really important. It needs to look like one fluid document. It shouldn't look as if 5 different people put this proposal together. So each student is going to sign off. It's going to be an online survey where you'll sign off by using your typed signature to indicate that you have reviewed the entire recommendations proposal and feel that it met all the requirements and that you've double checked. That will be worth 25 points. And also making sure that the people within who are doing the proposal and editing, that all the page numbers are correct and everything is formatted consistently. So in order to help that all the sections are formatted consistently, I'm going to pull this up. This is an example. It's a template for each of the sections. So you can see the title of the section is large in all capital letters. It's double spaced. The subsections are off to the left, underlined and bold. And it's just a good way for you to keep everything consistent. So that is that. Okay, so now getting to the specific parts of the proposal, I have detailed requirements of each part of the proposal so that everyone knows what to do. And if you have any questions, you can of course ask your professor and they'll have more information. And I'll explain each of these sections in some detail. I'm going to now go through each of the specific parts of the proposal so you and your team members will know what to expect. The information provided in each part of this proposal is to give you the specifics of the format and what needs to be included. You can use your own creativity within your team in order to see what you put in there, but for formatting purposes and for consistency and to make sure that you put the right information in the right sections, these guidelines need to be followed. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is a letter of transmittal. This letter transmittal will be one of the last things that happens, but when you're submitting it, it's going to be one of the first thing that the organization or department will see. You'll actually submit this as a separate file from the proposal. It will not have a page number. It will not be included in the table of contents. The one thing about this letter transmittal is you're going to need to put it on your consulting company letterhead. So you'll end up making a consulting company letterhead with a logo and a slogan. You're also going to make sure that the margins for this letterhead are 0.3 at the top and the bottom and 1 inch from the left and the right. It needs to be in a specific letter format so that you can, so it looks like a letter. It's supposed to introduce the proposal to the audience. It's not actually meant to be persuasive, but in a way it should show your interest in working with the organization and how your consulting company would be the best company to select for their communications proposal. The next thing that you'll see here is that each of the content that needs to be included in the paragraphs are listed. There'll be some examples that you'll find on CourseDen, and again, this is not going to be included in the table of contents. The next section, which is actually the first section of the real proposal, is the cover page. So you'll end up having a cover page, and this is all the information that you'll need to include on there. The next thing in the proposal will be the table of contents. This table of contents will not have a page number, and we'll be explaining to you in CourseDen how to format your Word document so that you include all the sections and you're able to number the pages so that the cover page and the table of contents do not have a page number. The page numbers begin with the next section. We'll also give you some tips on how to create your table of contents so that you have a dot leader like you would see in a textbook that would have the page number after a series of dots at the end. So we'll be explaining that in more detail. Okay, the next first main section, which is actually done last because it's the executive summary, is this executive summary section. It's the last thing because this gives an overview of the entire proposal. So this includes some concepts of what were recommended, some of the funding if that's part of the that optional funding if you go through there. Again, emphasizing your consulting company as being credible and reliable and wanting to have this job. And you can see what you need to include in each of the different paragraphs. This executive summary isn't too long. Again, it's a summary, so it should be about probably a page and a half at the most if you include any kind of charts, maybe 2 pages, but it shouldn't be too extensive. That's what the other sections need to have. So this first section after this executive summary is a statement of need. This statement of need is the first and most important part because this part sets the stage for all other aspects of the proposal. So basically what you're doing in this section is you're indicating why it's important for that department or organization to revamp their communication so that they can improve their image, so that they can get more members or students involved, and that they can get students and members involved by doing different activities or events or other kind of promotions that will get people thinking about that department or organization. So it could be based on people's impressions of the department or the organization, and you're going to need in this section to provide evidence, and it's really important that you provide evidence. This evidence you can make up. Because of the time that you need to do this project, and due to the fact that you don't have a lot of time, you can make up some statistics, some testimonials. You can create a survey and actually survey maybe some people in your residence hall, maybe survey some friends on campus, and make it seem as if that represents the population. You can come up with some analogies, maybe some recent news in the media that would support why people should go to that department or students should get involved in that group. Maybe talk about how other schools or other departments on campus have more student involvement or membership, and why it's really important that this company or this department or organization that you select use your services and can become better based on the needs. So again, you can create some evidence hypothetically to support why you're doing this. Now, the reason why a lot of things in this proposal are hypothetical is because we, your professors of business communication, are more interested in this aspect of seeing whether or not you can take data and take information and put it in a written format and then later put it into a presentation format. So by you putting in evidence or indicating evidence in writing, we get to see how you do that, how effectively you do that. You might need to put charts or some kind of graphics. You're going to need, in some cases, to cite where you got this information if you found something in a magazine article or a web blog. But this is the information that you'll need for a statement of need. Within the paragraphs within the statement of need, you can see here what would be included, some of the ideas that you should think of. You don't have to complete all of these bullet points, but it would be good to think about those and how you can apply them to this section. And each section will always have an introduction and a conclusion paragraph. And in this section, the A and B, so that you can get full credit, is to actually find articles, do a hypothetical student survey, maybe look at testimonials from students on campus or members in the organization, find some other kind of data to support why they should take your recommendations for the communication strategies, and so on. And then it gives some information of how to set up a citation for an APA format, which you'll also get more information on CourseZen about. The next section is the company background. And in my opinion, this is the most exciting section if you're creative, because you're basically developing a hypothetical background of your consulting team. So this is where your consulting team needs to prove that you're credible, that you guys have competence, that you are caring, and that you have character. So you'll start off with an introduction paragraph. There'll be some company values, so what your team really values and what your team is looking for. You can look at chapters 1, 3, and chapters 10 for ideas on how to really prove that your company is on the up and up and can be trusted. The next section will be the internal and external communication, and this is going to be another subsection with multiple paragraphs, possibly describing how you deal with your clients, your employees, so that they can see that you know how to communicate effectively, so therefore you'll be able to help them communicate more effectively as well. Some optional A and B in this section could be to blend in a mission statement or vision statement within the various sections, or have separate sections for these ideas, company goals and objectives, company's keys to success, or any information like that. One thing that that's mentioned here in this important area is the idea that in order to really think about how you can be as professional as possible, you'll probably want to go onto the internet and do a search on consulting companies and look at different consulting companies and see how they market themselves. That will help you think about how you can market yourself. Please do not cut and paste any information that you find on any of these consulting company websites. You'll need to take what they have and redo it so it's your own original work. But again, it'll help you think about how consulting companies market themselves to their clients. The next section is internal and external communications. As I mentioned before, this is the largest section. And this section has a lot of different subsections. And that's why the person who's doing this section might want to ask other people in the team if they want to help out or give feedback. So they'll be relying on others, hopefully, to just get some more ideas and thoughts. So there'll always be an introduction, and this is the introduction to the section. So what is going to include and why it's important to include it and why it's important to the consulting company to share this information. So the first thing would be the current communications of the department or organization. Once you go to the organization or you talk to the organization and you find out what they're doing internally and externally, internally meaning with their own employees, and externally how they're dealing with others outside the department or organization, you will give a narrative on how they do it, and you'll have a subtitle on how they do it, and then you'll need to include a chart. So this chart needs to be based on the internal and external communication. You can create an image or a graphic, a chart or a table explaining them. It could be a feature benefit chart, a frequency table, frequency timeline. It could be anything like that. And again, you'll find out a lot of information when you actually talk to the department or organization. The next subsection is SWOT analysis, which is the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is narratively describe the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that that department faces. And then you need to, once again, create a chart or figure. And it's easy to do that if you create a chart and figure using Microsoft Word. They have the word art, and in word art, word art, there's, let me just double check. It's called, hold on. Smart Art, that's what it's called. I apologize. So you'll need to go into, you might want to go into Smart Art to do your SWOT analysis chart in Microsoft Word. The next subsection is a comparative analysis. And this is where you're going to compare your department and or organization to a comparable or competitive department or organization, possibly on UWG's campus or even a different campus that's similar to University of West Georgia. And this way, you're allowing the audience to see similarities and differences. You can go above and beyond by analyzing more than one comparative department or more than one competitor. You can create a chart, and that would be A and B. The differences between maybe communication or the website differences or social media. And then this section will also need a conclusion. So what you definitely want to do, just to mention the comparative analysis, you'll end up wanting to go to a different university and see what that department in a different university is doing or what other different departments are doing. So we're getting towards the end, and the end is the recommendations. And this is where you need to have at least 6. You need 2 for the departmental organization image, 2 for the increasing membership or student involvement, and 2 for developing external communications to increase image and involvement. So you'll end up having an introductory paragraph, the recommendations, that 2 for each, and then a concluding paragraph. If you have more than 6, that would be considered A and B, or above and beyond, so you can get full credit for that section. So this way you can think about different ways and keep coming up with ideas of how the department can make recommendations. And it could be a recommendation such as improving the website or having their staff trained differently, or having an organization go to maybe team building retreats or something like that. So with that in mind, this optional next section is the funding requirements section. This is optional if you'd like. This is optional because you might not even need to even deal with this section, but if any of your recommendations require funding, this is where you explain the recommendation, you would explain the funding that's needed for it, and have a chart or a budget with line items of what they would need in order to make this recommendation come to fruition. So for example, I mentioned one of the recommendations could have been a website. So if you're saying that, you might want to look up how much it would cost to get someone to help with the website specifically, or maybe someone to help with their social media and pay someone to do that, maybe a graduate assistant or some other paid employee. If you're if you're recommending the staff go on some type of leadership retreat, you could look online to see how much a leadership retreat would cost, or make up a number of how much it would cost, and you can include that. Think of a realistic number. And then that last one I mentioned, just kind of quickly, was if the organization wanted to have a team building retreat or something like that, you can develop a price for that and what it would cost. And this would be in this optional funding requirements section. Again, it needs an introduction, a narrative, a chart, and a conclusion. And then last but not least, the conclusion, which would include the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. And at the end, you'll have everybody sign the proposal. You can have people that are in this team come up with titles like CEO, CFO, CTO, whatever it might be, or spell it out like director of marketing, director of public relations, chief executive officer, president, whatever it might be, but you can give everybody titles of this company. It might be, a lot of people do that. And then at the end, they would have their signatures. Make sure that this conclusion is very persuasive. This is your last chance to really get them in writing to let them know that your company is willing, ready, and able. You might even want to throw a gimmick in there that you'll give them a discount if they sign up, or extra service, or whatever it might be, just to try to persuade them to hire you and your consulting team. And the last section is a references section. You're going to end up needing 4 sources. One of them will be the website of the department or organization that you selected, and then you have to compare it to another one. So that could be another school's department or organization. So there's 2. So basically you need to find 2 more, and then if you want to go above and beyond, find maybe another 1 or another 2. You can do that in your statement of need or other sections to really provide evidence that your recommendations are worthwhile, or that the department actually has a need. So that is the actual proposal. Hopefully this gives you the information that you need, and we'll be going through each of these different areas when they're due closer to the proposal and due date, and when things are going to be due for the drafts.